Welcome to the Business Ethics Podcast. I am Blake Peterson, and joining me today is Jina Hwang with JobShare Connect here in Omaha. And Jina did not want me to call her doctor, but she is a Ph.D., and I really feel like that's important to put out because what an incredible accomplishment. What did you get your education in?
So my background is in organizational psychology. And so in layman's terms, it's not clinical. So, I'm not trying to figure out what happened to you in your childhood
Right.
and in your past, but it can easily be explained by like business psychology. So helping businesses to be more effective and more efficient and helping their people and helping companies grow.
Joining me, it's super interesting to hear more about what you do and how the future of work is going to be affected by people like you in your industry. Maybe right now, JobShare Connect is somewhat of a disruptor, you could say, but it can also be an incredible solution for people. So before we get into everything that JobShare Connect does, can we maybe give our listeners a little background about you? How did you end up co-founding JobShare Connect, and now as CEO of the space, what brought you to this point?
Well, it was really about solving a problem that I had personally. So I went through a lot of schooling and was really focused on my career for the large part of my 30s. And I knew that I wanted a family, but my career was really important to me as well. And so waited for a while, and when I was finally ready to have kids, ended up having twins. And, I thought that I would have them and I would take a little bit of time off and then come right back to work and everything would be the same.
Yeah.
And that's just naive and ridiculous because when you have kids, it changes your entire life. Mm-hmm. And so when I had them and they were born premature and they were in the NICU for about 2 months.
Oh my gosh.
And so when I brought them home, I just couldn't imagine going back to work in a full-time capacity. They weren't sleeping. They had different schedules. And so while they were sleeping, I wasn't. I literally didn't sleep for 8 months.
Yeah.
And while my previous employer and boss were really accommodating and understanding, they said, come back when you can. You can work from home. You can do some project work. And even that, I tried to go in for a few hours a week to begin with, and it was just really difficult. One, leaving them at home, and then also I breastfed for a year, and so, having to pump and having to try to do all those things was just really difficult. Mm-hmm. And my husband at the time was traveling a lot, and I'm not originally from Omaha, and so I didn't have the support of family to help me through that. And so it was really difficult, and I couldn't see myself being able to go back to work in a full-time capacity.
Right. And a lot of really great points you bring up. I think a lot of people have to deal with as well, not just yourself, right? And it's primarily a lot of females, obviously, are mostly affected by this. And I can only imagine having to do all of the breastfeeding, everything for 2 kids, because my wife just doing it for 1 baby right now, it is an incredible job and something that luckily men have no idea what it takes. So my hat goes off to you for doing that for a year and making it through that. And I'm so happy that your kids are obviously healthy, 6 years old, almost 7.
Yeah.
Now 2 girls. So that's awesome. It's great to hear. I'm glad you're able to spend time with them.
Yeah.
So,
and just to, it really, women have so many responsibilities and have, obviously have to do the breastfeeding and carrying the baby. But it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I have a Ph.D. and I would rather go through that process again than to go through having twins again, and the late nights, and I mean, all of it. So, it's the most difficult thing and the most challenging thing, but, also one of the most rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Trade everything else away for those two little girls, I'm sure, just like I would do, and any
100%.
other parents. So that's awesome. Well, you saw a problem and you decided to go solve it for yourself, obviously.
Right. And I thought, man, like, I can't be the only woman who is going through this. No. And so, right. And I have friends and, they all talked about it, but really, if you don't have children at home and you haven't gone through it, you don't know how difficult it is.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I thought it was going to be a piece of cake and I could go back. Right. And I didn't know why all these women, before were complaining about, not being able to do it all. But yeah, when you're going through it, it's a lot more difficult than you can ever imagine. Mm-hmm. And so as I was going through this, I love them so much, and I'm so grateful that I had that time to be with them. But it's hard. And as a woman and as a professional, I experienced professional, and personal identity loss. And I, as much as I wanted to go back, I just didn't know how, and I knew that other women were in the same boat, and so that's really how it started. And my co-founder, Jessica Charlson, she also has 3 kids and was going through the same thing, and we both have a passion for women in leadership. We were actually met in the Women's Fund circles. They're just right out here.
Yeah, that's cool.
So shout out to them.
Yeah.
But we met there, and we were on a steering committee together. And, we got back together and said, what can we do? Like, why are we still having these issues?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, these are not new issues.
No.
Our moms had this, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers. And so why is it that we still can't get it right?
Right.
So we set out to figure out, how we could work differently, and really just looking at the work model that we are currently in and have been in for over 100 years. Mm-hmm. And it really just doesn't make sense. And so we started to do some research and found that job sharing was often listed, but really, people really don't know much about it. And even me, with my background, I didn't really know much about it. And, I would joke that I don't know if in college I missed this, if I was like hungover, or I missed this in class, but I didn't, it's not taught.
Yeah.
We're taught best practices and the way that things have always been done. And so it really was about just thinking about work and how and why we work the way that we do, and seeing that it doesn't make sense, and how can we change it so that it fits us now in the lives that we live.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. And you're so right in how much this has affected so many women and generations of women for such a long time. I'm sure there's a lot of people from men who are affected by it as well. No doubt about that, but primarily women. And the opportunity that this brings to the company is what is really intriguing to me. And so for background now, where we are in this moment in the country, obviously. So we got through COVID. There's a lot more remote jobs happening nowadays. People are working from their homes. We are at a point in the economy where it seems the Fed is trying to push us into a recession. That's certainly what it feels like. They want to see unemployment numbers come up. If that does happen, it's because it's more expensive for these businesses to employ people. It's a higher cost. They can't afford to do it and stay profitable, so they're able to do it. Well, job sharing might be a way for these companies to be able to bring down sometimes cost of employment, open up employment opportunities that weren't available in the first place, and so potentially be able to still grow, but do it in a more, cost-efficient way. Am I correct in assuming those things?
Absolutely. with all the changes that we've seen, one of the things that people have really embraced is, their time and wanting to find some purpose and meaning in their work. And, I think before COVID, I know that as a consultant, I worked with a ton of companies, and even the companies that I worked at, said that, there's no way that we could do remote. Everyone has to be in the office. And when COVID hit, the next day, the next week, everyone was working from home. Yeah. And a lot of those companies have continued to allow employees to work from home, and found that employees are happier and more productive. And, the reason why that happened, though, is because it was forced.
Right.
Right? If COVID didn't happen, we wouldn't be in the same place where we are now.
No.
So as much as it makes sense now, and we can't even think about going back to the way that it was, it just wouldn't have happened if the circumstances with COVID weren't the way that they were.
Right.
Having said that, now people can live anywhere. They don't have to live in the city, and, the cost of housing is a lot more affordable. Maybe they can move closer to family and have that support, or just, live in a cabin, as long as they have an internet connection.
Yeah, right.
But, if people are happier, then they're going to be more engaged, and then they're going to be more loyal to the companies. And so, and we've heard of all of the turnover of people leaving companies, and, it's been chaos, and things have just been changing at such a fast pace. It's been really hard to keep up. But yeah, companies really need to start thinking about different ways that they can support their employees and to make them stay.
Right.
And one of those ways is through job share, because, for a lot of reasons, obviously I'm biased, but really job sharing is a no-brainer. It's a win-win for both the employer and the employee. So for employers, when we first started Job Share Connect, we put out a survey in Omaha and found that about 68% of employers said that they just couldn't find the right talent. And the thing is, though, is that there are so many talented people in Omaha who are not in the workforce because it doesn't fit with the typical 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 work schedule.
Right.
And so if companies can start thinking about, now we've changed where we work, and now thinking about how people are working and how you can work differently, and how that might look in the future, it really opens up a lot of opportunities. With Job Share, it provides, it taps into a talent pool that traditionally has not been tapped into. You think about part-time work, and oftentimes companies find that the talent or lack of talent in part-time job pools, has been lacking. And so by opening up Job Share, and for people who don't know what Job Share is, it's basically two people sharing the roles and responsibilities as well as the salary of one full-time position. So for me, I was in a professional position, and when I went to look at jobs, there are no director, VP of talent management positions out there that are part-time.
Right.
Right. You might have a fractional one.
Sure.
That's also a new model that's become more popular. But if I could share that with someone else, I would be a lot happier because I'd be able to still utilize my skills and experience. And then I'd be able to work with someone and learn from them. You know, if, say, I wanted to, or I applied for a VP of HR position, you know, I have the talent management background, but I don't have like the hardcore HR. And so if I did a job share, someone with that HR experience and I could come together and, you know, we used to say that instead of looking for a unicorn, we build them through job sharing because, you know, if you look at job descriptions that companies put out, they're really oftentimes unrealistic.
Yeah.
It's like you want everything.
Right.
And that's just not the way it happens. And especially as you get to the higher up positions, you know, for job sharing, that's called top sharing. And for instance, like Netflix, there's co-CEOs, so they're job sharing. But that makes a lot of sense because if you think about the amount of information that you need to know as a CEO, I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Right? And so you may have certain parts of it, and so you may have the breadth of that knowledge, but you wouldn't have the depth. And so by having two people that you would know and be able to accomplish a lot more.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the point you made about when you think about a part-time employee or the people who are applying for the part-time positions, well, that's because more often than not, those part-time positions are for the very lower end of the job, right? You, like you said, you're a very well-educated person. You have a lot of job experience. You're not going to be, you know, applying for a job, answering phones, and then sending it along to the next person, right? That's not where you want to fall in the employment category.
Right. And also, you know, I did some bartending in college and I thought maybe I'll do that.
Right.
But then also that takes away from other jobs that other people in the community could be having too.
Right.
You know, and especially if it's something that it's not really fair to the employer because I'm not really committed to that. I'm just doing it because that's all I can find.
No doubt. Yeah, it is different. It's a different situation. And this is, if you can change the way you think about these higher level positions, or even mid-level, it doesn't have to be executive positions like you say. There's all kinds of positions where we're stuck in a thing where it's like, if I'm employing somebody, they need to be here 40 hours a week. I need to get this out of them. But you really have a position that needs to accomplish a certain goal, and that's it. If it takes somebody 40 hours, that's fine. If it takes 20, who really cares? You're going to be paying them the same if they're on a salary.
Right.
And if they're super efficient and you're paying them half, they're on an hourly roll, they're probably not staying around that long because they sound like an incredible person, a unicorn, kind of like what you're talking about. They're going to move on from your company pretty quickly. So if I can get...
Or you can retain them, right? So companies should be more proactive in developing their people and then putting them through the pipeline for those higher level positions and creating mobility within their organization to keep people. Because a lot of times, you know, what we've heard through COVID is that people have been leaving their companies because they've been pigeonholed in certain positions. And so if they go to another company, then they're able to gain different experiences in, you know, a different department where if they stayed in their previous company, they wouldn't have those opportunities.
Right.
And companies are missing out because now you are starting over. You know, you have all the costs of recruiting and training, and then you lose all of that institutional knowledge.
Right.
And, you know, it's also doesn't help with morale at all.
No. Yeah, people oftentimes are leaving jobs for reasons other than money. You know, it's usually something personal, culture related, things of that nature, or because of life happens.
Right.
And now we can't do things the way that we were before because I have kids at home now that I want to see grow up.
Yeah.
And
you know, it's when we were first talking about this and why, you know, Job Share Connect started was because of the situation that I was in, being a new mom. And so, yes, it's great for parents, but also, you know, caretakers of aging parents. You have that sandwich generation who are taking care of their parents and children.
Right.
And then you also have, you know, it might be people new in their career who are going to school and or trying to get graduate degrees who need extra time to be able to do those things, or people who have different passions and maybe are an entrepreneur and have a side gig and want to pursue, not only what they're doing in their everyday job, but, maybe they have a passion and a dream that they want to follow, and being able to do a job share would provide them with that stability that they need to be able to bring in a steady paycheck, but then give them the flexibility to do other things. And then also for pre-retirees. So, and that's a really big deal and a really big opportunity for companies, because you have all of these experienced people who have been with your company, who know your company, who probably built and grew your company, who are now wanting free time, and they deserve it.
Yeah, definitely.
And they still have so much to offer, but they should be able to travel, and they should be able to, play golf or be with their grandkids and do whatever makes them happy and things that they want to do. But also they have still so much to contribute and so much knowledge that they could be passing on and training and just continuing, that institutional knowledge and knowledge transfer.
Yeah, I mean, the more we talk about this, I know the conversation starts and we think, okay, this is obviously because of your experience, what you went through, women would be a great candidate for this, but I just keep on seeing more and more different types of people, different lifestyles that would be a great fit for the job sharing situation. Do you ever see where one person would commit, like they want to dedicate more time to it, they could work in maybe more than one job sharing position? Is that something that you see people do?
So that is actually one of the pivots that we made. So I won't get too into it because I can really geek out on this. Right. But really, the potential of job sharing is, two people filling one full-time position is just the tip of the iceberg. Right. That really is on the most basic level what job sharing can bring and contribute, and allowing people that flexibility. But there's also, like you said, if people wanted to do a different job share can really be used as a full talent management solution. And so what I mean by that is that if you look at the employee life cycle, starting from when they are, when you're recruiting and interviewing and, assessments, there's training, there's employee training, there's leadership training, and then you have performance management, succession planning, engagement, and culture. And through all of those components, you can use job sharing. Again, I already talked about the knowledge transfer with like pre-retirees, but then also with new employees as they come in, you can use it for training. So if you had, say, one full-time employee who wanted to, go and explore a different area in a company, then they could still, and some companies will have like rotational experiences that they provide their employees for development, but then it leaves a gap, right? So someone will go into a different position and learn, but then oftentimes they're just flailing. Usually it's like 6 months to 9 months, and you don't know what you're doing. You feel like a fish out of water, and you're not very productive. Meanwhile, no one's doing or, the team that you had before is taking over and trying to fill in those gaps. Right. And so by having one person, do one job share in one area and, another job share in another area, you can really maximize the training. So if you think about it as like a learner and a teacher, both in that capacity. So in one situation where you've been doing the job for a long time, someone else can come up and you can be teaching them and training. And training is a massive problem. Yeah. How are companies training employees who are coming into companies, and how are you making sure that they're building and learning the skills that they need and not just in a classroom.
Right.
And, adult learning theory, people don't learn. I mean, they do learn a little bit in the classroom, but, the majority of learning happens on the job. It's experiential. Yeah. It's through actually doing the work and then also learning from others. Yeah. And so this really is another way of training and development that companies have not tapped into, that where job sharing can really be beneficial.
Yeah, I think, what is the scalability of all of this as a business owner? When is it the right time to begin thinking about making these kinds of moves? Because when I think about some of the situations you're describing, it seems like a larger workforce. Seems like you're going to have, if you have different departments, you've got a lot of employees, you're able to kind of maybe start doing that job sharing case. Is this something that you see small businesses able to, I would see it almost like the small businesses can leverage it for growth, while the large businesses might be able to leverage it for retention and knowledge share training, like you're saying. Do you think it goes both ways? What's the best fit?
Absolutely. Because in a lot of companies, you often do see people doing more than one job.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're doing everything. And especially in startups, you're doing everything.
Yep.
And so if, and as a small company, if, you have 5 people on your team, 5 or 10 people, and one person leaves, that again leaves a huge gap.
Right.
And so if you had if your employees or some of them were job sharing, then at least you would have half of an employee, and things would still be, continue to work. It's things aren't going to, balls aren't going to drop, and things aren't going to fall apart because work is still being done.
Right. And in all of these job sharing situations, is it a mix between purely remote work and people who will still actually go into an office space part-time, or is it almost all remote? How does that work out?
So job sharing and how it's done, there's so many ways that it can be done. It could be done in the office. It could be done remotely. It could be hybrid. And so it really just depends. You could have someone in another country that's in a different time zone who could be doing work while you're sleeping.
Right.
Right. And so you can think of it that way. Or also, one of the problems that has come about with remote work is that employees are feeling isolated because they're just at home looking at a computer. There might be meetings, but you don't have that human interaction that people really need.
Yeah.
And so with a job share too, it's kind of like a built-in best friend.
Right.
There's lots of engagement surveys, and, Gallup is out here and they have, there are 12 questions, and one of them is, do you have a best friend at work? And through Job Share, and part of what we do in Job Share Connect is being able to match job share partners who have similar or complementary skills, who are going to be able to work well together, not just on paper, but in real life.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, work, besides, home life, work is where you're going to spend the majority of your time.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to be working with someone, you need to be able to communicate with them. You have to trust them. And so through the work that we've done, we have a proprietary job share readiness survey, and helping people to say, yes, like you would do well job sharing. Like, it's something that you would probably enjoy doing or not. Some people can't get out of the mindset of, this is my job. I do this, you do that.
Yeah.
And also there's some fear of competition and those types of things that people need to get over. But as far as, the opportunity goes, it can really be done in so many different ways. And it really just depends on the job share team and how they want to work. And often, as we've talked to HR and some companies, they have had concerns of, well, now, there's so much coordination that we would have to do, but really the job share pair takes care of that.
Right.
Because, it's their hours. They can figure out when they want to do it. And, we're all adults and we can figure it out. And when you allow people that ownership and that accountability, then they do a better job.
Yeah. With your connection to the companies and the people you're placing, because I'm assuming, I think we want to talk more about this as far as how you help companies do this, because it sounds like there's more than one way that you help companies try to achieve this. But you're trying to find a long-term fit for these jobs. This isn't a temp agency. Am I correct in assuming that, right?
Yes.
We're looking for a long-term fit. Are these employees going in and becoming actual W-2 employees of the company? Are they more often than not 1099 at this point? How do the companies deal with it?
Again, there's a lot of ways. The way that we do it, people would be employees of the company.
Okay.
So it could be contract, but mostly, we want them to be invested in the companies and to be able to grow with the companies. And so job sharing is a great flexibility solution, but it's not something that people would typically do for their entire career. Right? So as life circumstances change, then you can move in and out of a job share as needed. So if someone was in a job share because they had children and then their children graduate and now they're off in college and now you have, a lot more time and now, maybe you move into a full-time role or you can go and do another half share.
Right.
So it really just depends on the circumstance and applying and adapting that, and for companies to be proactive and knowing that there's going to be change and allowing people to be able to move through that within the company and to be able to retain them through all of those changes and not have them jump ship and go elsewhere.
And it does make sense that in that scenario, like you mentioned, the individual who wants to expand their role in the workplace, if they're able to still do what they have been doing while they're learning a new position, that's great. Or if you just move them into a new position already, at least half of that job's already being taken care of.
Right.
So at least something is getting done there while the next person is coming in, training and learning and whatnot.
Right.
So this can add a lot of flexibility. And then when someone does quit, because somebody will quit, that's just a part of being an employer, you're not losing a full position at that very moment.
Right.
You're losing half of one.
Right.
So you're a little bit ahead.
Yep.
At that
and then
point.
when someone comes back in, you have someone who's going to train them.
Right.
And, there's built-in training and there's built-in accountability and quality control.
Right.
Because it's not like you get lost in a big company and you say, there's a huge team and they say, I wasn't supposed to do that.
Yeah.
It's either you or me.
Yeah.
And so,
right.
We're going to work together and typically, a lot of companies, in some of the research that's been done, they found that productivity in job shares goes up by about 30%.
I believe it because people are spending less time on it. You're not just glued to that computer screen for 40 hours and maybe that's not the way you function.
Right.
Maybe you do better with 25 and you can be super efficient during those 25 and that's it.
Right.
So like I said at the beginning, if the work's getting done, who cares how long it takes? We got to get away from that as employers.
Right.
That's the thing that's stuck, Now, if you're doing manual labor, you're doing something, answering phones, whatever, I understand sales. Okay, there's some things you just have to spend a lot of time in. But if you are hiring a head of HR and everything stays in order and HR is doing its job, do you really care if the person does it in half the time? You probably shouldn't. And if someone can do it in half the time, great.
Right.
Wonderful.
But then typically what happens too is, people want to be challenged. And so if that's really happening, then they'll probably look around and say, what else could I do? How else can I be adding and contributing value to the company.
Right.
And especially if you have employees who are really engaged, they're going to want to do that.
Yeah.
So, again, that won't happen throughout your entire career, because sometimes you just want to, do enough so you can go home and take care of a baby or do whatever. But employers who are being proactive and looking for ways to accommodate their employees during those times are going to be the ones that are successful in the future.
Right. And I think that shows how much you care in your workforce as well, if you're able to be flexible at those times, because so many instances of people leaving, being upset, with their job comes from problems like these. If you can keep everybody happy, you might be surprised at how less you have to give on the other end to keep them there. I mean, I saw in 2022, most people who changed jobs received a 14% raise. So you got to think 14% raise every year. It's probably not very realistic as a company. So who are the people who did stay? The people who feel taken care of,
Right.
because so many opportunities. I mean, I have so many clients who took jobs in California companies this past couple of years because they're getting paid a California salary living in Omaha, to a point you made earlier. And it was a very easy switch for them. So they just left this local business here, hopped ship, jumped to this one in California.
Yep.
And there you go. They are able to do everything they want, work remotely. You're providing opportunities to a whole section of the workforce that's not tapped into yet, like you've mentioned before. So where do you see, once you do this, you start doing job sharing, you bring these people in, they are employees of your company, you're going to, hopefully they assimilate to your culture, hopefully they're good fits for everything. How do you see it working long-term with their interaction, their relationship with the company versus those other employees? Do you think that employers treat them differently because they only work that partial time? Do you see there being instances where you could see kind of them not being treated as well by maybe some levels in management from this? Are there any instances like that you've noticed?
So one of the things that, as we've worked with companies, and so if we come in and say, now we're going to offer, new employees the opportunity to job share, then what we found is that employees who have been with the company often feel slighted because they didn't have that opportunity.
Right.
So that's one instance of, making it fair and creating those opportunities, offering them to existing employees as well as future. And then also, a lot of it, there's a big stigma around part-time too.
Right.
Right. So people who are part-time are typically seen as those who aren't as motivated or committed to the job or the company. And that's this mindset shift that we need to go around, and that needs to be changed. And it's a big one. It's a paradigm shift of knowing that people can work differently. It doesn't mean that they're not working or that they don't care and they're not motivated.
Right.
They just want to work differently. And, a lot of times people are afraid to ask their employers for job share opportunities. Job share is actually not new. It started in the 70s, actually started in the U.S., which is ironic because it hasn't really taken off in the U.S. as it has in other countries. But people are... Sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
No, you're fine. No.
Can you edit part of this out?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We'll edit this out. No worries.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're fine.
Can you remind me?
No, yeah, so we're talking about... obviously with how people are treated within companies who might be seen as part-time.
So a lot of times people are afraid to go to their employers and say, hey, can I do a job share? Can I work differently? Because then they feel like now they might be marked as, a red flag of they're not as committed. And so we better watch them. And when a promotion comes up, we might not tap them on the shoulder or ask them to apply because they they want to work part-time or they want a job share.
Right.
And then you also have, job share only works if the manager gets it and supports it, and really all the way up the chain.
Right.
So we've seen people who have job shared in companies successfully under one manager, and then that manager leaves and someone else comes in who doesn't support it, and then, it doesn't work, or they don't allow them to do that.
Yeah.
And so, it really needs to be something that is adopted and, where there's buy-in within the whole company, and that employees know that, I may not have a job share right now. I may be new in my career, but when the time comes and I do need more flexibility, this will be here.
Right.
And we've talked to people who have been in college, and they've said, oh, yeah, people are looking for those when they're looking at employers. Like you said, it's not just about money.
Right.
People really are looking at what else the company can offer besides pay. Obviously, that's important, but there's so many other factors that come into play of having a job and keeping a job and staying with the company.
Yeah, and being able to have them as a W-2 employee, perhaps that gives them access to your benefits and whatnot, depending how you have that all framed. That's a big reason why people can't leave jobs. They're stuck in a job because insurance is so expensive.
Yep.
They can't afford to leave anywhere. Maybe a job share could be a solution for those people, making them happy, take care of your employees. A better, happier workforce is hopefully a more productive workforce. And even if the number of employees is larger, the salary cost is not.
Right.
That's a big point of this, right?
Right.
You're not paying two salaries. You're splitting it in half. The other costs that might come into it, of course, you can't avoid that. And having an employee and whatnot, just making them W-2 employee, you're going to have to pay a little bit more for every employee for other things. But it's not going to be nearly as expensive as trying to replace that one person, to your point, from everything that you're going to lose in productivity and training and whatnot on the way.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. It really is little to no additional cost, because if you think about a job share, everything gets put into one bucket.
Right.
And so it's not like now you have two buckets and you're, have more that you need to hand out.
Right.
In some cases, companies will offer benefits to both employees. In other cases, if we talk about some of the ethical implications, some companies that, Job Share Connect really would not want to work with are companies that are looking for loopholes to try not to pay for benefits or to provide benefits for companies. But on the other hand, it can also be a win-win, because if two job share partners have a partner or a spouse who does have benefits and they don't need it, then, the company doesn't have to pay for it.
Right.
And so in that case, it does work out. But in the U.S. especially, benefits has been really kind of a sticking point of it being more difficult to do in other countries, obviously, because a lot of other countries offer free health care.
Yeah.
So we're behind in a lot of ways, but we never want that to be a reason why job sharing is not offered, because there are ways to get around it. And if you think about everything in one bucket, then if one of the job share partners needs benefits and the other one doesn't, then you can prorate some of the salary or some of the other benefits that go along with that too.
Yeah, you can get creative with it to make it work for everybody. And as an employer, it's also important to always remember, okay, what is the value of this position to our company? And so you're like, all right, if I do have to take on a little bit of extra cost in order to split this job into two, but it makes that position more productive, then I should be getting a great return on that investment.
Yeah.
I mean, just to be able to, especially for existing employees, I see this as something where, just so people know a little more what they can contact you for not only to find a person to fill a position with, but am I correct in assuming you'll actually come in and help consult starting this process? If a company wants to begin the job share process, you can come in and kind of take a look at their company and maybe give them some ideas on where to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Ideally, we have both, right? It's kind of a chicken or the egg thing because we need companies to say that they're open to this and want to do it, and then to have the employees there to be able to fill those positions quickly. What we have found is that we have a lot more people who are interested in job shares than companies who are willing to create a program or offer job sharing. And so if companies are interested in learning about how job share could work in their company, and they might think, oh, it can work for that position or that industry, but not this position or our industry.
Right.
Job sharing really works across all industries and all positions. And although job sharing, does work, people, I think, will typically think of like an admin position, but really job sharing, like we've discussed, becomes really beneficial in those higher level positions where you have professionals. It might be positions that are difficult to fill, or critical roles where you don't want to have those gaps.
Yeah.
But being able to have that available makes a huge difference. And what we found too is that with companies that maybe can't compete with companies in California who are offering, huge pay increases, what we found is that some companies, if we really talk about how they offer that flexibility, how they care about their employees, oftentimes people are willing to be paid less because they are able to have the flexibility.
Right.
Whereas a lot of other companies don't offer that. And then what we found through that is that those employees are extremely loyal to those companies for their entire career.
Yeah, absolutely. They feel taken care of. They feel valued. And those are what's really important to people. Maybe they feel like they're making a difference, in the company, obviously, still being able to participate. Their identity, like you brought up before, can seem more fulfilled to themselves, obviously, because they have that piece and it's not missing. I like it all.
One of the things that we found in some of our initial research is that about 35% of people said that they would leave their current positions to go to a company that offered job share.
Wow, that's incredible. Did that data go down as far into like gender, age, anything like that as well? Was there a lot of difference in those groups, or did you find it was almost universal?
Well, what we found, and I think that's pretty consistent in the research, is that I think we had like 86% women who were interested, and obviously for caretaking reasons.
Yeah.
But we also had a lot of men too.
Yeah.
Who had different interests, and especially those who were pre-retirees.
Yeah. I see that as being a huge deal. Because a lot of times that person might not be what you say an executive, but they're also not the admin positions you're talking about. What about the coordinator? If you're a company, you're doing, my mother-in-law works for Steelcase. They're a huge manufacturer of office furniture, and she's been doing it for like 30 years. She's been in a position with them. She's the best person in the office. They don't offer any remote positions, but hers is remote because she said, I'll leave if not.
Because they don't want to lose her.
Can't lose her. So how are you going to keep her on for a couple more years? You're going to eventually have to start making these changes, these concessions if you want to keep that person. Because guess what? They can leave now.
Right.
They don't have to stay anymore. You've been with you for a long time. They've made their money. They're ready to go spend time with grandkids. How are you going to keep those people on board?
Yeah.
And they deserve to be on board. There's a lot of discrimination, obviously, in this country for many, many reasons, but age is one of them.
Yeah.
And so it'd be really hard if you're a person who wants to take a little more time to spend with your family, but what are your options to do that without taking just an incredibly lower job that you're not really interested in, probably requires more of your time than you're willing to commit to it.
Right.
So you have a solution for that.
Right.
And the ethical side of things is obviously, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And just a couple comments with your mom. I mean, that would be a perfect opportunity for job share, because then she could transfer all of that knowledge, get someone ready to take that position, and be able to have that training so that when she does, she will eventually leave.
Yeah, right.
Then they'll have someone and know that it's taken care of.
Yeah. That's great. No, I can't agree with you more. And I think that while maybe most of our discussion wasn't necessarily about the ethical implications of it all, I think that it's woven into this, and how you treat your employees is an incredibly important ethical standard companies should adhere to.
I will say that with job share too, because it taps into these untapped talent pools of people who can't work, a traditional 8 to 5 schedule, you're really, for DE and I, you're really addressing some of those issues and allowing people who traditionally haven't been able to work in these positions or have opportunities for growth and development to be able to have those. And so, we talk about pre-retirees and transferring that, but you can also use this as kind of testing the waters.
Right.
If someone can come in and they can just test something out without fully committing to this other position, and knowing that the position that they were in before is still being taken care of, you can really bring in and diversify your workforce, not only through age and gender, but also through ethnicity and attracting a lot of underrepresented people as well.
Yeah, and I loved that in your website, reading through it all, DEI was definitely there, but it's there because I could tell the way it's written into it. It's because it's what you do. You're not just putting it out there because that's what you need to do as a company these days to be respected. I almost feel like sometimes, there's a few investment companies that I won't name them, but I call in and it's like, and we are this most ethical company, or we worry so much about DEI, when I'm like, I know, I see your employees, and it's not true. You might have gotten an award for it or something, but you're just doing this because some person said, we need to make sure that everybody knows this about us, versus somebody who's actually solving that problem. And it just makes sense that way. It's a natural thing that what you all are doing is solving those types of issues that companies could be having because of the workforce that you're bringing onto the table.
Yeah.
You're bringing into the fold, which is wonderful.
Yep.
So, well, Jina, thank you so much. I really love learning about job sharing. If people want to get in touch with you and actually find out more about how you can help them optimize their workforce, I mean, this is an optimization of a workforce, truly, in a sense. And change, it's new, it's different, but what should they do to get in touch with you?
Well, obviously, you can contact me directly at Jina.Hwang at JobShare Connect, or you can go to our website, www.jobshareconnect.com. And I'd love to hear from you and love to answer any questions that you have to help either you or your company implement JobShare.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jina. I appreciate the conversation, and I can't wait to come back and have this conversation maybe a few years from now and hear how much it has changed, because it seems like it's something that's necessary and just needs to have some more buy-in.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is just, that mindset, that paradigm shift in leaders and progressive thinkers to really say, we want to do something different, and then doing it, and not just having it be lip service, but actually being proactive and taking the steps necessary to make it happen.
That's right. All you leaders out there, take action. All right. Thanks so much, Jina. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.